A very good evening and welcome. This is the Hot Seat. I'm Ramesh Shirugal Bandara, sitting in for Faraz Shaukat Ali. Now, you may have seen on the news recently the developments surrounding the 19th SAARC summit that was supposed to be held in Pakistan. So we thought of addressing this issue on tonight's Hot Seat. And with me tonight is Dr. Harinder Vidanage of the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies. He is the director of the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies. A very good evening, sir.
Very good evening, Ramesh.
So before we get into this topic in detail, could you give us viewers a brief overview of what SAARC is and how it was established?
Well, SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, was established in 1985. It was purely established to create an environment for regional cooperation. And of course, there were few things in the minds of the people, the leaders at that time who mooted this idea. And the idea has been around since the late 40s, since the birth of South Asian nations, the modern nations as we know of now. But during the 60s and 70s, especially after a couple of brutal conflicts between India and Pakistan, and of course the creation of Bangladesh in 1971, which were all brutal, which resulted in the deaths of many people. There was a consensus among leaders, and of course the Bangladeshi leaders at that time also, to create a regional cooperation which could emulate the prosperity represented by regional corporations like the European Union. The leaders were seeing that globally, in many corners of the world, regionalism was kind of the thing. It was very much trendy. It was seen as the most important institutional makeup. So that resulted in starting some conversations in 1980. Of course, they say the conversation that was between the Bangladeshi leader and our former president Jayawardena was the actual spark that led to the creation of the organization in 1985 in Dhaka.
So in today's context, now we don't really hear about SAARC being talked about in Sri Lanka among the general public, because it doesn't really play a big role. It doesn't have a big impact on the lives of the normal people here. Does SAARC have a significance for Sri Lanka?
With I would kind of go with your question. The exact reason is that of course, South Asia as a identity is not very prevalent. Okay. The notion of South Asia is contested in many ways. For example, if you go to any country of South Asia, and I say, if somebody asks you, where are you from? And if you say, I'm from Sri Lanka, they'll know. But if you say, I'm from South Asia, they'll be baffled. So one of the biggest crises of the regional cooperation is the identity itself. But saying that, the importance of the organization is more towards the security aspect of it. Because we are a region which is challenged by many security issues. We have the two very important nuclear powers within the region who are not in great terms, and I think this is the reason we are having this conversation today. And also the fact that we had the scourge of terrorism, insurgencies going on for the better part of the last 30-40 years. So regional stability via regional security via regional cooperation. Stability, security, cooperation, it was the major hallmark of creating SAARC. If there was a worry that the region might, disintegrate, there may be conflict because of security tensions. So SAARC was created to diffuse, control, contain, and of course see if we can prosper in the process. Because if you have security, if you have peaceful relations among nations, then there is room for economic cooperation and prosperity. So
now you spoke about economic cooperation. Why aren't the countries in this region being able to cooperate with each other economically and grow trade? Now we have good bilateral relations. Sri Lanka has good bilateral relations with both India and Pakistan. We have a couple of free trade agreements with them as well. However, as the SAARC bloc, we haven't been able to really promote trade between the SAARC region. Why do you think that is?
The reason is most of the trade that happens in the region is with external actors. For example, bulk of Indian trade happens with EU or China or Africa. So I think when you make economic policy decisions, you always look at what benefits you most. So most of these countries, including Sri Lanka, right? I think within the SAARC region, it's a fraction of the GDP of any country, or in totality of SAARC GDP. But most of it is with external states or external organizations, and that has been the way forward. I mean, people have benefited from it. So the only productive manner in which we had trade was through, as you said, free trade, more bilateral trade, deals, because then it was more specific. But as a region, the reason we don't have is because there is more prosperity trading with external partners than trading within. That has probably is the main reason of not having much of a prosperity in the context of trade.
Okay, so let's switch up to security, which you touched on earlier. Now, this whole SAARC issue came to the forefront because of the URI attack launched by India says Pakistan launched it, militants from Pakistan launched it, and this incident really brought the 19th SAARC summit to the forefront. With India's decision to back out of the summit, there were a couple of other nations that followed. Now, this cross-border issue, will it spell out the end of SAARC? Because if India and Pakistan, this dispute continues, do you think it will adversely affect SAARC?
Yes and no. I mean, that's not the easy way out for me. But what I'm trying to say is the problems between India and Pakistan, the cross-border tensions, have been there for a while. Ever since the conception of the two states, which were born, within 24 hours of each other, so the tensions have had prevailed, and we had seen 4 major wars. So, will this particular moment create a kind of a catastrophic meltdown of SAARC? I don't think so.
Okay.
But it also, the reason I said yes was, it is also a signature, is a symbol that SAARC is not heading the right way. Okay. You don't want, I always say, you can have, people, there are challenges in a marriage, but you don't want a terminally problematic marriage, right? So what we are seeing here is that the symptoms are getting worse. We thought there were India and Pakistan tried what we call CMBs, confidence building measures, for a long time. They were all short-term medication for a long-term illness. So what we are seeing is a metastasizing of this cancer in a way. So things are not looking bright. So I don't see a catastrophic failure or a meltdown of the institution, but what we are seeing is actually an argument that can be made saying the institution is no longer valid.
Okay, Dr. Harinder, let's take a short commercial break and we'll be back on the other side discussing more on this SAARC issues. Stay with Hot Seat. Welcome back. This is the Hot Seat, and with me tonight is Director of the Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, Dr. Harinder Vidanage. We are discussing the issues surrounding the 19th SAARC summit that has been postponed. Now, before the break, we were talking about SAARC and how tensions between India and Pakistan have affected it. I would like to draw your attention to another similar organization that is there in this region, ASEAN. ASEAN has been able to develop themselves despite having border tensions between their countries. Cambodia and Thailand, then Myanmar and Thailand, Indonesia has some maritime disputes. Now, these countries have disputes among themselves. However, the ASEAN bloc has been able to prosper. They've been able to increase trade in the region as well as externally, and they've been able to develop the entire system of countries that is in ASEAN. So why can't SAARC adopt the same measures that they have taken?
I think SAARC and ASEAN, though they have similarities, the way they function are quite different. And ASEAN also attracts more attention from global players. ASEAN has a lot of other new forums. ASEAN has been more innovative, and they have evolved. SAARC has been more dormant, and SAARC has been very much reliant on because I would say the under the aegis of India, where ASEAN is more, in a way, egalitarian. It has more big players. But of course, its major bulwark has been Indonesia. But if you try to compare the Indonesian role with the role of India, they're two different. Okay. Indonesia is extremely powerful, very wealthy. It's one of the most emerging economies in the region. But it's not nuclear power. It doesn't have the security or interest, or it doesn't. I don't think it has the same security or geopolitical interest that India has in the region. So in a way, the interests of these countries, such as, for example, within the two organizations, are quite different in a way and would have helped the way they have evolved.
So is it right to say that SAARC's actions are primarily dominated by the Indian thought process?
Well, yeah, to a certain extent, yes, because India is the largest, not just geographically or demographically, it is the most powerful country in the region, in the region, and in a way, the only other balance to India's dominance role, or the only other country which could kind of stand up to it in a certain way is because Pakistan and because of its nuclear capabilities. But Pakistan does not have the ability to convince India on things like diplomacy. It has the ability to deter, but not engage with India the way we would prefer. Okay. And the other problem is other countries in the region do not have the ability to shape the Indian agenda. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to be critical of India here. What I'm trying to say is it's pretty much it's deterministic, it's fatalistic. Mm-hmm. This is what we in international relations call the realism, the fatalistic determinism of India's position, mm-hmm. posture, as well as its capabilities. And the region does not have any equilibrium when it comes to other states. So, and the other thing is India's aspirations are very clear. It wants to be the regional powerhouse.
So now, directly after the Uri attack, Prime Minister Modi of India and his government took a decision that India wants to isolate Pakistan diplomatically, and afterwards they announced that they will be pulling out of the 19th SAARC summit that was to be held in Islamabad. Soon after India made that statement, three other countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Bhutan, they pulled out of the summit. Sri Lanka, a couple of days later, maybe 3 or 4 days later, the Ministry of External Affairs put out a release saying that the environment is not conducive to conduct the summit. Then later on, a few days back, during the Prime Minister's tour of New Zealand, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe made a special statement. I want to turn our attention for a moment to that. We'll be right back after turning our attention to the Prime Minister's statement.
Sri Lanka's request at the inception of SAARC in 1985 to include cross-border terrorism was rejected. At the time, this was considered to be a bilateral issue. Today, cross-border terrorism has gate-crashed the SAARC summit. The recent terrorist attack on the Indian military base in Uri resulted in 4 member states stating their inability to attend the Islamabad summit meeting in November this year. Sri Lanka, which is opposed to terrorism in all its form of manifestation, condemned this incident and expressed regret that the prevailing environment does not permit the meeting. Yet, if SAARC is to play a useful role, the annual summit meetings at heads of government level must continue. Therefore, this postponement must be utilized by the member countries to reflect on the question of cross-border terrorism. The future of the SAARC depends on an outcome acceptable to all members. If not, SAARC's days are numbered.
Now, in Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's statement, he says that he condemns the attack on the Uri military base, and then he goes on to say that if SAARC is to play a useful role, the annual summit of heads of government meeting must continue. And then he says the future of SAARC depends on the deliberations of the countries and the outcome that they put out. So, is this playing it a balancing game with India, or what do you think the Prime Minister's statement meant?
Well, I think you can deconstruct or analyze the statement in many ways, and in any analytical framework you have dominant in your mindset. But I think what the Honorable Prime Minister was trying to say, there were few messages. But the last message struck me most because he said, well, we are kind of coming to the end of times of SARC, which I also echoed earlier in this kind of saying. Well, it looks like SARC is kind of being the analog watch in a digital age. Is it coming to the end of its the way it is in its current form? So I do agree with the Honorable Prime Minister in that analysis, because I feel SARC needs a radical reconfiguration of its current form to survive, to have to be viable and to be relevant to the 21st century security and geopolitical environment. To try to answer your question about whether we are drifting into India's under India's dominance, well we didn't jump in like the Afghans or the Bhutanese, and we took time. And I think what the Sri Lankan government is trying to say is, what's the point of having the summit when 4 countries have backed out? Of course, some people can argue, well, didn't we just ditch Pakistan, because we were the decisive vote in that? There were 4 against and 4 undecided, right? And Sundry Sri Lanka saying that we would not participate in a very indirect manner. Does it mean we ditched Pakistan? Probably that will be our next question. So I think that's the obvious question in our mind anyway. So let me try to address that in a thinking that is the hypothetical question. Well, Pakistan has been a great friend of Sri Lanka. We have had great relationships. They have helped us in one of the most. They have helped us in very difficult moments, especially during our 30-year conflict, especially when the Ilam War 3, and military aid has been significant. But then my thinking is like this. I always take the example of the family. It's like you being put in a situation to decide if your elder brother was hammered just by your best friend, your best friend who had been with you in the thick of it, who had pick up pieces when you were down. But how would you react? How would you take decision? Are you going to let the best friend decide take his side, or will you take your brother's side? Or the reasons may be unfounded. Maybe it was your brother's fault, which he got hammered by your best friend, or your best friend provoked your brother, and still So we don't know. I'm not trying to justify what your friend did or right or wrong. The reasons for his actions were right or wrong. But the thing is, your obvious decision, or what's your obvious reaction, what's your stance. We are in a kind of a situation like that. Sri Lanka. Most of our former leaders have always said, reiterated, India is not just a neighbor; they are brothers. So Sri Lanka, and of course, again, the determinism, fatalism comes. If you look up the map, they are just there. So for geopolitical reasons, Sri Lanka, in a way, our policymakers doesn't have the luxury both of us have. We can argue this. We can discuss this. But policymakers have little leeway when it comes to. I'm not trying to criticize them. I'm not trying to say that is the right thing they should do. But policymakers doesn't have the luxury we have as analysts, or you have as a journalist, to make those decisions. So I'll just rest it there.
So we're going to take a small commercial break. We'll be right back with the Hot Seat, and we'll continue to discuss Sri Lanka and the 19th SARC Summit. Stay with Hot Seat. Welcome back. You're watching the Hot Seat on TV1. I'm Ramesh Bandara, and we are discussing the 19th SARC Summit and the issues surrounding this summit. Now, earlier we were talking about the decision taken by Sri Lanka with regard to the 19th SARC Summit. Is it right to say that Sri Lanka is primarily playing a balancing act with regard to all the countries in this region? Because earlier, when this story first broke, we spoke with you, and you said Sri Lanka has a unique opportunity to bring both parties together and play a sort of a mediating role. However, now with the current statements that have been made, that is not possible. However, now, is it still possible to bring all these parties together and hold a heads of government meeting?
Well, very clearly, yes, I still stick by what I said to you before. Because if you look at Sri Lanka's foreign policy and history, we have been at the crux of, the epicenter of this. We were the people who provided the forums. Non-aligned movement, many countries take the credit for creating it, but it was conceived in this country. The ideas from our from prime ministers and the way we handled the Indo-China war, the Sino-Indian war, how Mrs. Bandaranaike kind of created a forum, a venue to bring the two rivals together. So Sri Lanka has done it, and is the only country in the region which has the capability to do it. We are the only country which does not have any of the baggage. We don't have, for example, Afghanistan has significant security, economic reliance on India. Bhutan is landlocked. Bangladesh has a historical kind of, in the context of its independence. Sri Lanka does not carry that historical baggage. Of course, we probably, you can argue, but our leadership, our statesmen in the past, we have had the best of relations with India and Pakistan, and also with all other nations. We don't have a historical enemy in the region. We don't have, and we are very close to most of these countries. So we are in this ideal position where actually this is great for Sri Lanka. Diplomatically, we can be the mover and the shaker. We could convince countries. We may not have the power as India or Pakistan, but we have the moving ability to set the stage, to create the forum. We can be the venue. The venue has always been our strategic strength. And if we have leadership in this country which can convince the leaders of those countries, like our past leaders did, which is if you look at the history of Sri Lanka's foreign policy, the legacy lies there. How we solved problems, how we mooted ideas of the Indian Ocean as a peace zone. Right? So we had leaders who could think like that, and we had leaders actually which created, which led to the creation of massive movements like the non-aligned movement. Of course we can do it.
Hypothetically, if you were tasked with this process of bringing these countries together, how would you set about doing it?
Yeah, hypothetically, I would not imagine me doing it. I have no political or leadership interest. But, well, I think we could use our position to first, approach these, it's all negotiations. It's diplomacy at its core. We use the best diplomats, and maybe use a couple of our statesmen who have had, family legacy is a bit of a critical conversation, but South Asia is political elites has a family legacy, and we could use that. We have those people in our country who could, our old statesmen who have ex-presidents who could reach out to both the leadership of India and Pakistan, who are extremely respected. I'm not talking about their local political role, right? But there are leaders in this country who are still respected by both Indian leadership and the Pakistan leadership. We could utilize that strength. Our strength has always been our people.
Right. Now, the venue of the SAARC Heads of Government Summit has always been changing with every year.
Yeah.
Islamabad has hosted this twice already, and now after this was postponed, do you still think that Islamabad is in a position to host it? And if not, is Colombo a viable second option to hold the SAARC summit?
Colombo should always be an option. Colombo is where everything meets. Then it'll sound like a little biased, and my national partiality would come into play. But I also feel if it started from Islamabad, it should end. If the tension was conceived because of this, the moment we ditch Islamabad, of course, it happened once. I think it was in 2005 in Dhaka. I think there was a security situation where a couple of political leaders were killed, and the Indians again boycotted. The Indian leadership boycotted going to Dhaka. I may be wrong, but I think it was 2005. Incidents like this has happened before, but since it is very sensitive, and since I think most of us agree that isolating Pakistan is not the best answer, it may be the short-term response. It may be also reiterating India's security perimeter, security, providence in a way. But I don't think for regional cooperation in the future, SAARC, isolating a powerful country like Pakistan is the way forward. So,
all right. Just before we wrap up, I have the SAARC charter with me. Yeah. I want to go through it and see how many of these points have been fulfilled at the moment. So I would want yes or no answers from you for this round of questioning. So Article 1 says to promote welfare of the people of South Asia and to improve their quality of life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's one point. To accelerate economic growth, social progress, cultural development in the region.
Would say still yes, because we have a growing, Asia is, region.
But has SAARC impacted directly to it?
Well, that's contested. But I think any cooperation, any form, if it's even it's minute, it of course,
Contributes
it
to it.
contributes. For example,
Right.
Sri Lankans go to, Sri Lankan Buddhists go to Bodhiga, and now we have free visas. I think that's thanks to SAARC.
So third point is to promote, strengthen and collective self-reliance among countries of South Asia.
Well, that is, I don't think it's the case. We are still very much reliant on extra-regional players. And
So
actors.
that's 2-1.
Yeah.
To promote active collaborations and mutual assistance in economic, social and cultural fields.
I think so, because there are a lot of communities of, for example, our scientists, our scholars, our teachers. We have had a lot of good collaborations within the region.
To contribute to mutual trust, understanding and appreciation of one another's problems.
Well, it's sadly there were confidence building measures, but it seems like it has not worked in the long run, especially because of India and Pakistan, not because of other countries.
Right. So to strengthen cooperation in other developing countries. To strengthen cooperation with other developing countries.
I don't see SAARC. That's why I said ASEAN has done it, but I don't know this SAARC has, as an organization, has managed to merge with or work with other organizations.
So that's 3-3 in the balance.
Yeah.
To strengthen cooperation amongst themselves in international forums and on matters of common interest.
Of course, I think yes, because we have, for example, within like World Trade Organization or within in a lot of UN mechanism bodies, I think we have tried to work together as a bloc. Yes.
And finally, to cooperate with international and regional organizations with similar aims.
Well, I think again, yes, we have tried. Even if you look at Sri Lanka's Human Rights Commission vote and all this, how we deal with situations in the United Nations, I think sometimes the caucus works. We work as a caucus, the group.
So the score stands 5-3, and the future of SAARC might depend on this score itself.
Yeah, as I said, the institution is important and is needed. The configuration needs to be redone.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Harinder, for joining us on the Hot Seat
Thank you so much
tonight.
for having me.
And that's all from us. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Rameshwar Bandara. Good night.